what is the difference between capital and money?
Yeah. So capital is everything that humans possess that is capable of producing a return. And I'm going to define a return in energy terms, which isn't the only way to define it, but I think this will be helpful. A return is where you put 1 megawatt of energy into something and you get 2 megawatts of energy of finished product out. You have received more usable energy than what you put in. An example of this, a field of wheat. Let's look at all the energy that goes into growing a field of wheat. There's the tractor, there's the fuel, there's the fertilizer, there's the human labor, the manufacturing of those products. We won't count the sun because we don't provide that. That's how, what makes plants work. But so all of that energy, we add it all up, we assess everything. And we compare that to the total usable caloric energy in the wheat. And we discover we got more out of it than we put in. And that's a return. And so that's kind of in like raw energy terms, but it could also be like the energy that it takes to put hurricane shutters on a Florida home is far less than what it would take to fix the damage.
You know all about this.
I know all about this. Yeah.
By the way, just quick tangent. Everything okay?
We're good.
Yeah.
We're good. I mean, we were fortunate. It went 50 miles south of us. Like we got hit, some trees went down, but we're good.
All right, cool.
Thank you. But so, it doesn't take that much energy to put the shutters on, and it saves you a lot of damages if you get hit, right? So not only is capital factories and cars and trucks and commodities and buildings, but I use a broad definition. It's also knowledge. It's the ability to transmit education. It's technical innovation. It's not patents themselves in the IP sense, but like inventions, knowledge, learning how to do something new. It's communication lines. It's the ability to coordinate people. It's everything that allows humans to do more, to produce more, to be more abundant. And so money plays a key role here, but there's a really important distinction. The institution of money. If you look at like a market without money and a market with money, it becomes very clear that the institution of money allows the market and the economic system to become radically more abundant than it would otherwise because people can coordinate. It's this universal synchronizing force. But money in your pocket is not capital, right? It's an abstraction. It doesn't actually produce a return in of itself, right? Like you put the money on the table, there's nothing you can do with that money as a physical object if it was cash that would produce more, right? But it's money as it works in the system, the institution of money. So money, while not itself capital, and the important caveat there, creating money is not creating capital. You can't print your way to capital. You can't print your way to abundance because money itself, units of money, are not capital. But the institution itself plays a critical role in coordination, and it forms this very I use the word complex to say that it's just inherently so money interacts with physical capital to produce. I've called in the article spontaneous order. And so when you look at it, it's not easily definable. It's not easily measurable. The economy, it's so complex, and it's all these individual actors with local knowledge participating in a system. And so money makes that happen. Money comes in and provides a universal language to the market that allows business owners, consumers to make decisions, even if they don't know how the economy works. You don't need to know. So money and capital are different, but money plays a critical role in forming and creating more capital.
So what is capital?
Productive resources. Everything we have that is productive, that helps us do and have more.
But money does do that.
As a system. As a system, but not only as you use it to interact with tangible resources.
Right.
Yeah.
And money printing can't create more capital.
No.
Does money printing therefore destroy capital?
It absolutely does, usually does. You could come up with like an edge case where like the government is just brilliant and they print the money and they just spend it on like the best business idea you've ever thought of and create the next Apple. And in that case, yeah, they did. But that doesn't really happen in reality, right? It
Ever.
just destroys capital for the most part. And it distorts because it injects noise into the system. It distorts signal. And so it has a systematic deterioration that destroys or depletes capital.
So is money just a messaging system?
In a lot of ways, yeah. Money is communication. Money is information in a certain source. And Alan Farrington does a phenomenal job of, I want to make this point, and I'm pulling it fully from Alan. It's common that people say money or price contains information. And this is like something that gets said. And Alan does this phenomenal job of refuting that in an interesting way, where he actually says price, I mean, if you're going to say it contains some information, yeah, of course it contains some information. But the important thing that he says is that price actually reduces information to the bare necessity. So what's really cool about price, and I use this example of a banana in the article, of saying, okay, if you have a banana and you go to the store and this banana costs 50 cents, what information can you reconstruct from that price? Because if price contained information, well, it would be in there somewhere. Can you reconstruct how much rainfall the farms got, how many farms were competing in this market, the cost of their labor, how much humidity? No, like you can't figure any of that out. All you know is it costs 50 cents.
The only information that gives me is how expensive that store is.
Yeah. It's a pricey banana.
Yeah.
But so what price has done is it has simplified the information. It has made it from this really complex thing where there's a million variables and inputs going into it, and it's brought it down to not just one thing, but even a number that can be compared. You can now compare a banana to a car. If you didn't have like a number, you could not compare bananas to cars easily. So it's this enormous simplification of information that makes it so you or I, we don't need to know anything about banana production to know if we want to buy a banana, right? We just look at the price.
So what is the role of price within a market then?
Yeah. So price allows it allows people to coordinate, right? And it reflects, obviously, supply and demand. It reflects the availability of goods and the demand for those goods. And so bringing it back to this discussion of like capital formation, if you're an entrepreneur, right, and you're making a business plan, let's say you want to make a shipping company, you use trucks, you're a trucking company, you need to know how much a truck costs to know how much money to raise, to know if your business is going to be profitable, to know how much you need to charge for your services, right? Like if you don't, if a truck costs $1 million a truck versus $10,000 a truck, that makes a huge difference. And so the price allows entrepreneurs to create businesses and to plan and to price things. And it allows this synchronization, this order. It allows this spontaneous order to emerge. Because people can compare things, people can make decisions, and it reflects, obviously, supply and demand. And so you have this problem in systems, right, where if you distort price, if you print a bunch of money, if you lower interest rates, if you manipulate money as the denominator, money as the measuring stick, you make it tremendously more difficult for entrepreneurs to make good decisions.
So a kind of wider question is, where did the distortion come from?
Yeah.
Because money came before we had central planners and interest rates set by central planners, before we had central banks. And how did things operate before then? I don't know if you've done that as part of your research, and I apologize if you haven't.
Yeah, so I'm going to have some limited, I'm not, a historian here, but And there's a lot of competing views on. There's a lot of competing views. This is a contentious
What
topic of
came
how money
first,
evolved.
taxation or central banks?
Taxation, for sure,
Yeah.
100% easily.
Without taxation, you wouldn't have had a central bank.
Of course. And I mean, governments have been doing taxes since, I mean, Mesopotamia. I mean, in Mesopotamia, you can find interest rates, you can find loans, you can find landlords, you can find all these things. But so prior to the ability of a central, so the distortion, you asked
Yeah.
where did the distortion comes from? Kind of going back to my first principle that money reflects the real, prices reflect the real. Interest rates naturally occurring reflect the real. The distortion occurs when some central authority that has the ability to manipulate the supply of money or the time value of money, which is interest, manipulate it. They come in and distort it. And I want to be clear here because we'll probably talk about low interest rates, money printing. But this could also happen by artificially making interest rates more expensive, raising them, or even destroying money. Either one is an alteration. Either one is a distortion. We just don't normally see the other one because it makes life harder for governments.
So pricing is a messaging tool. Pricing is used to it's like a messaging system to allow people to understand the cost of something, that allows them to plan what they require for their business, what they want to accumulate. How does that work then or what is the pitch therefore for a free market? Why is the market so efficient?
So that's kind of this incredible thing. It's kind of this, like people will call it kind of an emergent property, which I joke basically is like hand waving for we have no idea of how this thing emerges. It just like, there's all this complexity and this very ordered structure comes out of it. So you basically have, it is this interesting synchronization between the universal and the local. So all of us are local actors. I know what I know. I interact with you. I interact with Danny. We participate in whatever structures we're in. And we have knowledge about those structures. And because we have certain knowledge, it allows us to make decisions. It allows us to evaluate price and know how much we're getting paid and know how much things cost. And all of that kind of synchronizes together on a more universal level to produce this highly structured order that is the economic system. And that's what makes it so good. And it emerges organically from the knowledge of countless individual actors making decisions in their domains of expertise, which is their real lives. And so that it's this signal, it's this, coherency of information that emerges from millions of individual interactions. But so when you have a central authority, when you have a central bank, when you have a government that decides they're going to interfere with the very kind of the measuring stick, the unit, right? It's like if everyone uses a 12-inch ruler to build a house. And then one day the government wakes up and they change out all the rulers for an 11-inch ruler, but they don't tell anybody. And so they still think they're using a 12-inch ruler. That distorts everything in the system because you're using that as a measure. And the same thing happens with money, right? If we're using money to price things, we're using interest to price things, and that gets distorted, nobody knows really. It distorts all of those calculations and that cascades through the system.
So do you believe the role of the central bank is with good intention that becomes malicious, or do you think it is a central planning system that can only fail because everything it's trying to do cannot work?
I would, if you look at the history of central planners, they all kind of had good intentions, right? They had utopian intentions. You look at the modern era, right? And the Soviets, they were trying to build a utopia, right? They were, in seeing like a state, James Scott, I mean, he does a great job with this, where he looks at the history of central planning failures, and they're always trying to do something really good, but it fails because it's the same principle as with money, right? Where you have a central authority trying to exert control over an organic system that produces a higher quality of information than that central authority can ever have. And that's the breakdown. The central authority can never have as much information as the naturally occurring market. And this is why interventions in money produce such chaos. They produce such disorder.
Because what appears like one small decision can have a cascading effect
Cascading.
through everything.
Yeah, it's the second order impacts, it's the cost benefit analysis, it's everything that emerges from it, right?
And it's an unfairer system. A fairer system is one that is bottom up.
Fundamentally, letting money operate naturally is a fairer system. It is an organic system. Just don't distort it. Don't change it. The governments can go keep themselves busy with something else.
Okay, so in a fair, freer market, how would interest rates, what is the role of interest rates and how should they work?
Yeah, so interest rates will emerge naturally, right? We looked at the Ledin dashboard, right? Like nobody told those guys, hey, here's what you should lend at, right? There is an interaction between the supply of capital, of money, and so in a market, there's the availability of capital and physical resources. There's the availability of talent, entrepreneurship, like projects to lend to, the quality of those projects, and the demand for those loans. And all of those kind of come together and synthesize a bunch of information and produce the interest rate. And if capital became incredibly abundant, that interest rate would come down. If capital got incredibly scarce, that interest rate would go up, all else equal. And so you have this problem. I think it might be helpful. So one of the things we see with artificially low interest rates, so we have actually like a lot of history of this. If you look at the 1700s in England, if you look at the 1800s, you can find all of these examples. This is not the first time in history we've tried artificially low interest rates. People have had the brilliant idea multiple times that we're going to kind of monetize our way to abundance. That if we can just manipulate the money in the right way, if we just make more money, make money abundant, then we'll have growth. And it goes pretty much the same way every time. It produces speculation, it produces asset inflation, it produces capital misallocation. And, eventually that kind of collapses in on itself or causes a crisis.
And it widens the wealth gap because the access to capital is
the asset inflation. Yeah, so two things. Asset inflation, whoever already owns the asset, those go up.
Yep.
And access to capital, right? So I have some quotes in the article about, I think it's a Bastiat quote, and he's saying that under your system, which was low interest rates, he's debating this guy, Proudhon, and the wealthy will borrow for free, and the poor will not be able to borrow at all. And so, you think in like a low interest rate regime, if you're Apple, you can probably get pretty close to that 0% interest rate when that was available.